Hello and welcome everybody to yet another discussion video. And yeah, so I'm talking about this. uh I guess there's no real way I couldn't talk about this given what the past couple of discussion topics I've done have been about. Um so yeah, the Sonic movie came out at the time of at the time of me recording this came out I think 2 days ago, and I saw it last night. Probably one of the first times I've actually seen a movie on its opening weekend, actually. But yeah, so I saw it last night, as I said, and yeah, I'm gonna just give my thoughts about it, considering I haven't bothered talking about it up until this point, and because of the fact that it was leading up to release, I felt like I'm not gonna bother trying to think of topics and see what to talk about it. So yeah, I figured because timelines kind of lined up, and because I had intention of, and most likely seeing the movie anyway, I just figured, you know what, I've been doing discussions on Sonic stuff recently. Why not do one on the movie? I've never done anything like this, or at least not for a while, so yeah, we're gonna go with it. So yeah, I'm just gonna kind of go with it for this. And I have some notes that I wrote down um, earlier today about certain aspects of the movie and stuff like that, and I'm gonna try to go in line of. I'm gonna try to keep as close to like the timeline of the movie as far as like discussing certain aspects, but I might kind of go all over the place. My notes are a little all over the place, but yeah. As far as this also, just for the record, this is going to be just a general discussion about the movie, so like spoilers and all. So if you have not seen the movie, or you want to and you haven't done it yet, or like whatever your situation may be, feel free to bookmark this video, put it to your watch later, your a playlist on YouTube, or like whatever. Do whatever you want. You can come back to this video later. But if you care about spoilers, but if you don't care about spoilers, or you just want to hear a general discussion or whatever, or if you have seen the movie, then continue to watch. However, I will, for the people who may not have seen it yet that may be watching this, I will give my general thoughts, or at least some general thoughts up front. Um, Overall, uh, I liked it. I thought it was a solid film. It wasn't like a masterpiece or anything like that. Granted, I don't know if anybody was really going into this movie thinking it was going to be that. They certainly weren't thinking that before the last trailer we got came out. Um, but this, considering the build up to this movie and how much of a roller coaster it's been, even from its very inception, because remember, this movie has been trying to get made since like 2014. So the fact that we even got anything, let alone got a 180 from what we were originally shown, is kind of nuts. But that aside, like I said, I don't think it's a masterpiece or anything, but I think it's a solid film. uh, it's got some good humor to it. I think uh, the way they portrayed Sonic's character, I think, has um, has a lot of charm to it. Um, that also has to do with how they portrayed his character in this film, which I'll get into when we go further in the discussion. But just general thoughts. Yeah, I think it's a solid movie. Um, very different from, it's something different from the games, which I don't think is inherently a bad thing. And for what this movie is and what it did and what it did with certain aspects of the series, I think I think is good, because in this case I think this is a case where they just did their own interpretation, and I think it led to us having something interesting, or at the very least having something different, which is something I think more so Sonic fans to some degree can appreciate, uh, just because it is something different. But yeah, overall, those are, I guess, my like basic thoughts. Is just my initial thoughts is just I think it's a solid movie, especially considering all the stuff building up to this film and just the roller coaster of a ride it's been. I think the fact that we got at least a solid film out of it, I think is like, I don't think you can really ask for. I mean, you could ask for it to be an amazing film, but the fact that we did get a solid film at the very least, I think that's satisfactory, considering, like I said, the roller coaster of a ride, the build up to this movie, like all of that stuff, considering how crazy it's been. The fact that we got a solid movie out of it, I think that's pretty reasonable, So yeah, I thought it was a solid movie. It's kind of in that vein of, what you would kind of think with a movie like this. It does do some of those things, but it also kind of kind of exerts those expectations a little bit, at least as far as I'm concerned. But yeah, anyway, just as far as the general my general thoughts, I thought it was a solid film, and I think there are places that they could go to in the future that might, I don't know, there's definitely things that they can go to and expand upon in the future that could give us stuff that's even greater than what we ended up getting. But yeah, overall, I like the film. Um, and yeah, I don't know if I can really say much more without just kind of rambling on, and not getting into the actual discussion itself. But yeah, so for those of you who wanted to know at least some general thoughts without giving too much away, I thought the film itself was solid. I thought they did some interesting things with this franchise, that they did their own version of it, and yeah, for the most part, I think everything clicked. I thought things were handled well. There are certain things that I did enjoy quite a bit, and there's some aspects when you really look at the film as a whole, at least as far as I'm concerned, kind of like I was saying, they kind of they kind of go the opposite direction of how you think things would go in a film like this. So, but yeah, overall, yeah, I liked it. But anyway, so going on to getting really in depth about the film. Um, However, moving on to the spoiler stuff, because I'm not going to try to skirt around talking about this movie without, because that's the way I feel like I can actually talk about it. I just want to talk about anything in general without trying to have like a filter put on or anything. But yeah, so moving on to the just full on discussion, spoilers and all. Starting out, like I said, I'll try to stay within the timeline of the movie to some degree. Um, the beginning of the movie. Um, First of all, actually, just something I am just thought of, actually, and I'm glad I thought of it, because I didn't have it in my notes. Just a small little thing during during the opening of the film with the logos and the companies and stuff. Uh, One thing that they did do that I thought was interesting, because they did do the whole Paramount thing where they had the rings around the Paramount logo be the actual gold Sonic rings, which we've seen in the trailers, or at least we saw in one of them. Uh, so that was cute, but that's not what I'm actually talking about. We kind of saw this in the second trailer as well, But what's interesting is this movie starts off with being under a like it starts off with a label at the beginning of the movie that says it has the Sega logo, and it does this kind of you know I don't even know what you would call it, but it does it shows a bunch of squares and has a bunch of Sega, Sega franchises in general, like a bunch of them. And we saw it briefly in the second trailer, I think. But what's interesting is this movie, it has a like a label attached to it to where it's this movie apparently falls under I believe they were referring to it as a Sega original film or something like that, which is interesting because nothing like that was in any of the trailers. I mean, we only got two of them, but nothing like that was in any of the marketing or anything, I don't think. And it makes me wonder, is this movie going to be like the first of, I mean, not just Sonic movies, because, we'll get to that later, whether there'll be another one of these, but could we get other Sega franchises as movies at some point? Because that could be interesting. I mean, granted, it could just be a label that they're like, oh, it's a Sega Originals film, and then they never do anything with it again outside of possible Sonic movies. It wouldn't be the first time something like that has happened, but who knows? Maybe we could see more Sega movies in the future in the vein of this Sonic movie. So that was a small thing I just thought about, and I didn't have it in my notes, and I'm glad I remembered it, because I thought that when the movie was starting, I saw that, and I thought that was interesting that it started that way. But yeah, just a little something to think about. But it could go absolutely nowhere. But I just thought it was interesting, the possibility that maybe we could get more Sega properties turned into movies. But anyway. But yeah, the beginning of the movie starts out, and it kind of starts off right off the bat with a little bit of an action sequence, but it's like it starts in the middle of an action sequence we'll see by the end of the movie. And then we get tossed into the actual beginning of the movie, because this movie does a thing where, Sonic's in the middle of the action sequence, and then it pauses, and then he talks over, is like, how did I end up here? It's one of those things. And then it rewinds all the way back, and then we get to the beginning of the movie. And the beginning of this movie is basically the backstory for Sonic that they're giving in this film. And I thought it was interesting because, I mean, in general, with the Sonic series in general, we've never really been given an origin for the character, which is kind of crazy considering this franchise has been around for at this point, nearly 30 years. And we've never really been given an origin of any kind for this character. I can only think of one, and it was in an issue of the comics however long ago, and maybe there's one other example of a possible origin, but I can't think of one. So it's interesting that this character's been around for nearly 30 years, and they've never really bothered to do anything like that. But this movie does that. And so really all we get is we see, and it's a good amount of this stuff, some of this stuff has been in the trailers, or some of the little clips and stuff, but we see Sonic when he was younger, when he was a baby, just running around. First of all, we see Green Hill, which has been in quite a few of the it was in the first trailer, I think, or it's been shown a couple times. One thing I also want to point out, and I didn't have this in my notes either, but I'm glad I'm remembering all these little details that I wanted to talk about. This was in one of the trailers too, but I'm glad they kept it in the movie. Freaking congratulations to Hyper Potions, who did the music for the Sonic Mania trailers and worked on some of the tracks for Team Sonic Racing. Congrats to them for getting a part, a solid 5 or so seconds of one of their songs that they made for Mania. Congratulations to them for getting their song ultimately featured in like a full-on big screen Sonic movie. Like, congrats to them for just having that happen to one of their songs, because I believe it was the song "Friends" that Hyper Potions made for Sonic Mania for one of the trailers. That song was featured in, I think it was like the Baby Sonic trailer or whatever that initially got released in Japan. That music played in that trailer, but they actually kept it in the movie. So, yeah, like I said, congratulations to the Hyper Potions for ultimately their music finding its way into a Sonic movie. I don't think Hyper Potions would have ever expected that in one of their songs to show up in that capacity. But yeah, congratulations to them on getting their song ultimately featured in a movie. But it's just like crazy to think that who would have thought that like 2 years ago or so when Mania came out that one of the songs in the trailers would ultimately be featured in a Sonic movie. But anyway, that's just a small thing I remember. I picked up on that they actually kept in the movie, and it wasn't just a music for the trailer. But yeah, good. Congratulations to Hyper Potions. But anyway, but yeah, it starts out in Green Hill like we saw in the trailers, and Sonic's a baby in this or in this sequence and stuff like that, and he's just kind of I think he's saying more or less some of the stuff that was said in the trailer. I think too. I don't know, but yeah, it's we just see him running around a bunch and stuff like that, and not much is really going on, but things get more interesting by like the second half of this like little bit of backstory where we get to see like his parental figure, like basically his guardian or whatever, and it's an owl named I believe her name was Longclaw, and there were some I think leaks and stuff before the movie came out that did mention a character's name by the name of mentioned a character by the name of Longclaw, and I think I think we found out that it was an owl character, but we didn't know anything more than that. And yeah, it turns out Longclaw is an owl that is basically a guardian of Sonic when he is a kid. And turns out, and I don't know if any of the leaks talked about this, but like I didn't really dig into any of this stuff beforehand. But the Longclaw is actually a motherly figure, a female character, as opposed to a male father figure, which wasn't what I was expecting. But then again, it's like it works either way. It's just I heard the voice as soon as Longclaw was speaking. I was like, oh, it's a mother. Okay, all right, whatever. It's just a small little thing because I guess I wasn't really knowing what to expect in the first place because I wasn't digging into the leaks and stuff that happened. But I saw that and I was like, oh, okay. But yeah, so yeah, Longclaw is basically the parental figure, the parent figure for Sonic in this, I guess, this universe that they're making, and then we find out that the reason why, and we see this in in that Baby Sonic trailer that they released a while back as well, and people were speculating on this, and it looks like they might have been right, unless they try to say, oh, this isn't actually the case. But the reason why Sonic actually, because this is also mentioned in the trailers, of Sonic was driven to Earth because he wanted to get away from people that wanted to have his power. And we find out who, or at least in this scenario, who ultimately caused him to leave his world and come to Earth. And it turns out that it was a tribe of echidnas that ended up doing that, which people had speculated that because in one of the trailers in the background you could see like creatures in the trees on the branches and stuff, and people were looking at us like, is that the Echidna tribe? And it turns out that it looks like it actually was, which I didn't necessarily doubt people who were speculating that, but I was like, I don't know if they're going to go that far with it. But no, they actually kind of they went there with that. Like the fact that there are echidnas in this movie for in the beginning sequence is kind of crazy to me, because it's like, man, they really had to reach for, that, like, that's reaching a bit further into the actual Sonic universe than you would probably think that this movie would. And that's something I like about it. It's like, wow, they actually did, like, look into certain things, and they actually, went into took stuff from the universe that you wouldn't entirely expect them to do, or to take in the first place, and they put it in the movie, and it worked. Like, it they actually utilized the Echidna tribe in a way that was like, all right, yeah, that makes sense, and the fact that they were even there in the first place is cool, because that's stuff that Sonic, that's stuff that only fans who have been playing the games, well, if they've played SA1, they pretty much get the connection, and they would have to get the connection because they didn't really show, the Echidna tribe really didn't show up in anything else other than the comics, and I think Sonic X at a few points. But anyway, but yeah, it's just interesting that they actually did pull things from the universe, and you wouldn't necessarily think that they would have done that. But yeah, so yeah, Sonic gets driven from his initial home because he's basically getting attacked by a tribe of echidnas, and Longclaw basically helps him escape. And she does that by giving him a bag that has a bunch of gold rings in it, and these rings have the ability to, if you throw one of them and think of a location, that ring will basically be able to transport you to the location that you think of. And we've seen this kind of a little bit in the trailers as well, with the whole teleporting rings and stuff. And it's an interesting idea, and it's not terribly out of place, because you could make the connection back to the special stage rings in the classic games, with like Sonic 1 and stuff, where you did go through big, gold rings in order to get transported to the special stages. So them, having the rings transport you to different locations, it's not terribly, it's just a different interpretation of how it sometimes works in the games. So I don't think that's a big problem. But yeah, so Longclaw, I think, throws one of the rings, and I guess it was just, I don't know if they necessarily thought of a location or not, but it ends up taking Sonic to Earth. And so Sonic goes through the ring. He tries to go back through the ring because he's worried about Longclaw, I guess, dying. But the ring closes before he gets through it, and he's stuck on Earth now. We don't. That's the last time we see Longclaw and everything. So who knows what may have happened to her? Who knows? But yeah, that's basically the opening sequence, and it's a nice little opening sequence. Like I said, the fact that, like, they had some, they had the biggest thing about that is the fact that echidnas are actually there, and they utilize those characters, and it actually utilize those characters in that way in a movie. It's just that's really cool that they actually dug into the universe enough to where they would know about that. And I don't know, I thought that was really cool. But yeah, they're never really brought up in the movie afterwards or anything like that. And that's pretty much it for the beginning sequence. But yeah, yeah. So after that, it's I'm looking at my notes here. So if my voice happens to like go out a little bit, it's probably because I'm looking at my notes. Um, but yeah, after that, I think really this is probably where I'm going to start jumping around because I'm not going to be going super like one to one about everything because I don't remember the movie in that level of depth. But but I believe after that, it's just really kind of going through like what has Sonic's life been like on this planet, and because I think it even goes there's a time jump after that I think it's like 5-10 years later after that opening sequence it goes forward the like 5-10 years. So obviously Sonic's older and so it's a decent bit of time later. And this kind of goes into something that I was bringing up earlier, how this movie kind of observe certain expectations you might have, because you might go, because what I'm kind of getting at when I say that is more, you might go into this movie, maybe not so much at this point, but like I think a decent amount of people before this movie was released might have just been thinking like, okay, this is probably just going to be one of those, oh, let's do, because of the fact, I think people have, ever since they heard that, we heard that this movie was going to be a live action CG hybrid, people are immediately thinking of all the numerous examples where studios and companies have done movies like this, and they all basically follow the same freaking formula. All right, they're going to make, pop culture jokes or references, whether they make sense or not, or whether they're funny or not. They're going to put them in the real world, and they're going to show us the stuff at the beginning of the movie that we would want to see, and then they're going to put them in the real world for the rest of the movie, and then they're going to send them back, and just like, they're going to have human characters. Like, just go down the list of all the stuff that happens in these kinds of movies. And something at least as far as I'm concerned, this movie doesn't really feel quite like that. Like, there are similarities and stuff, and they do the pop culture jokes and references and stuff like that, and I'll get into that in a bit. Like, they do, like, kind of check some of those boxes, but the thing is, I feel like this movie probably does it better than the other examples that people, were comparing, other movies that people were comparing this one to. Because, like, something they could have done with this movie that they actually really didn't do is they could have easily have just, had Sonic been, be like a fish out of, it could have been a fish out of water story where, oh, he gets sent to Earth and now he has to figure out how Earth works and how all this other stuff how everything, works, how everything operates, and then he has to get used to it. They do not do that in this movie, I think, at all. Like, I can't remember if there's like any point in this movie where they make a big deal about, oh, Sonic's not from this world, so let's have him do, goofy stuff with stuff that's on Earth. Like they have him drive a car like once or twice in the movie, and they kind of play that up, for a joke a little bit. But even then, it's not like they make it where like Sonic's freaking out because he doesn't know how to drive a car. And all things considered, he probably drives the car pretty well. But like, that's much later in the movie. But like, they don't go, like, there's a few times I think where Sonic kind of questions a few things that he doesn't quite understand. But they never play it up as like, all right, let's just bash you over the head with the fact that, oh, Sonic doesn't know how anything works because he's not on his home planet. That's not what they do in this film, and they easily could have done that. And other films like, with this similar setup have done that, and people have, been kind of critical over it because of how many times it's been done. But this movie doesn't really do that, and that's just one of the examples I'm, talking about of how this movie kind of goes in a different direction or handles certain things differently than you might think. And I guess just, bring up another one of those examples since I'm talking about it is the pop culture stuff and just references and jokes. they are in this movie, but maybe it's me personally. None of them bothered me. Like, I didn't groan at any of them. I might not even necessarily registered them enough to be like, oh, I wasn't thinking about it too hard, you know? Like, I was focusing on everything else. There, like, the thing is, and I kind of got this feeling from some of the trailers too, because some of these moments are in some of the trailers and clips and stuff. Uh, did this movie need to have the like pop culture references and jokes? No. And to be perfectly honest, they could take probably every single one of them out of this movie, and it really wouldn't change anything. But I feel like they were fairly quick and fairly innocent to the point where it's like it's not worth getting upset about. It's just like, all right, Sonic, drops the rock at one point, and Vin Diesel and stuff. It's like, okay, whatever, it's like, okay, that happened. Who cares? But like, there's stuff like that, and another thing they probably could have done that at least I didn't pick up, except for one moment in the movie, and it's early on. If you were like thinking that maybe this is going to be like another product placement movie or something, again, I've only seen it once, and I wasn't like paying attention to every single detail of every single shot to see if there was possible product placement. But the only kind of pretty blatant use of product placement was early in the movie. Tom's either wife or girlfriend or whatever. Mentions, I don't even remember what the website was, but it was something that they were like talking about, like they had like briefly mentioned like ordering furniture or something, or something like that. I could be completely wrong, but there was like some website, and she flat out says the name of the website or the service, and then it even cuts to a shot of the laptop with the website pulled up on it, and it's just like, okay, that's pretty freaking blatant. Like, okay, I don't even know. Like I said, I don't even freaking remember what the website or service was. It's like pretty early on in the movie, as soon as the main human characters of Tom, and I forget the woman's name, the wife to Tom or the girlfriend to Tom. I forget her name off the top of my head, but like it's one of the first scenes, if not like the first scene that they're both in, and it's just like, yeah, that's like if you want to bring up product placement at any point in this movie, that would be one of them. And I was like, all right, that's pretty blatant, but no other part of this movie I think ever does that, which if anything makes it even weirder that that's the only part of the movie that's like that. But anyway, but like just in general, like stuff like that, they really didn't do much of it, if any of it, as you would think, like the pop culture references and stuff like that. Like, just stuff like that, I feel like it was handled pretty well, and it wasn't just a copy and paste of how other movies have done it. Did the stuff need to be there at all? Probably not. You probably take it out and it wouldn't change the movie really at all. But it didn't bother me or like anger me that it was there, and like I would like register it and acknowledge it for like a few seconds, and then it would immediately just like fade in my memory. So I don't know. It didn't bother me. The stuff with the references, the pop culture stuff and everything. And another thing, like, kind of on that topic, is they don't even use like a lot of like licensed music or popular music, which is another thing that a lot of these films tend to do and people complain about. This movie really doesn't have that many of them at all. Like, I think there's maybe 2 or 3, and even then, I don't think I even recognized any of the songs off the top of my head. I mean, other than one, because I think towards the beginning, there's a Queen song that plays towards the beginning of the movie. But that's towards the beginning of the movie, and it's only for a small scene, and it's a pretty good scene actually. Now that I think about it, I'll talk about that here in a sec. But yeah, like licensed music and just all that stuff you would kind of associate with a movie like this. Yeah, like they didn't really they I think they did it and handled that stuff in a pretty good way because there wasn't a lot of it. They didn't beat you over the head with product placement or pop culture jokes or references or iconic or famous music, like all of that stuff you expect. They didn't really do a lot of it in here, and I think that is going to help some people when they watch it, just if that stuff bothers them. But yeah, that's just something that I kind of picked up on, is like they didn't really do a lot of that, at least as far as I'm concerned. So it's just, yeah, I thought they did pretty well on that. Um, yeah, another scene that happens, like I was kind of briefly mentioning, is there's a scene earlier in the movie. It's probably one of the funnier, more charming bits of the movie, and just because of the way it's set up, just because of what happens in it, I already like it. But there's a scene earlier in the movie it was in the very first trailer we got with Tom with I forget what these are even called, but he's scanning the speed of vehicles that are going along the road, and there's actually not any cars going along the road, so he's just kind of sitting there. But by the end of the scene, he drives away, and Sonic kind of messes with him in the scene a little bit earlier. But Tom drives away, and there's a turtle on the road, and Sonic, he almost gets run over by a car, and then Sonic picks up the turtle last second, saves him, and then he starts talking about like, it must suck being so slow. Well, here's your lucky day, and he starts running like down the road really fast, holding the turtle, and it's a nice little scene. It's fairly humorous too, and just like personally for me, because turtles are like one of my favorite animals, and to see a turtle in like maybe like a part of a joke in a Sonic movie like that, it's just like, wow, that's actually two things I really like being in a scene in a movie together like that. That's pretty cool. So I liked that, as a personal thing. But anyway, moving on to the just very other things. But yeah, I guess also because I have it listed on my notes, and I was kind of talking about formulaic things that you would kind of probably expect to happen in these movies. I mentioned the fish out of water thing that isn't really a factor, because another thing is Sonic is, because he's not a fish out of water, he's very much accustomed, or at least to some degree, he's accustomed to how certain things work on Earth, and he certainly has the time to do it because of the 5-10 year span of time that passes since the opening sequence of the movie. Like, something I was kind of interested in is the fact that they also don't make it a big deal of like, I mean, they kind of do it, but they don't quite build up to it in the same way, where sometimes in these kinds of movies where like, oh, you clearly have a human character and you have a character that is clearly not like of this world or whatever, and then the first time they meet, they just like, scream at each other and they flip out, which that is in this movie. But the part that I thought was interesting was the fact that the build up to that, it's not like, when Tom and Sonic first meet, that is the first time Tom meets Sonic. But the thing is, that is not the first time that Sonic has actually met Tom in some capacity, or in some way, because Sonic has basically, in the town that this takes place in, which is called Green Hills, which is obviously a reference to Green Hill. Sonic actually just kind of like observes the town, day to day or day to day, and he just kind of gets a sense of like, okay, this is who this person is, this is who this is, and he kind of gets an idea of how things work, which again just goes further against the whole, they don't do the fish out of water thing. They do the exact opposite. They have him on Earth, and he becomes accustomed to certain things, and he kind of gets the idea of what's going on. Which I thought that was kind of interesting direction for them to take in it, because you don't always see that. Um, and the fact that they had Sonic and Tom, the main human character, the fact that in a way they kind of had Sonic establish some sort of relationship before the characters even met, I thought was interesting as well. Because usually they're just they build up to the two characters meeting, they have that whole sequence that happens, and then things move on. And yeah, they I thought that it was interesting. They kind of went about it in a bit of a different way than you would normally see in these kinds of movies. Um, but yeah, I guess just going on from that, I'm trying to think of like I don't know, let me look at my notes again just to go over more of these points. Oh yeah, one moment I thought that was pretty nice that also happens earlier in the movie is because Tom is. I'm not sure what Tom's specific job. I know he's. I don't know if he's necessarily like a policeman or anything, or a sheriff, or I don't know exactly what he's supposed to be, but it's something in that realm. And or I guess he's like a cop or something, I think. But something I thought was interesting is they earlier in the film they make it a point where Tom wants to, like, this is what he wants to do. He wants to help people and everything. And they make it a point where he wants to move. I think he says he wants to get move his he wants to take his career further, and he wants to go to San Francisco and maybe be able to, I guess, like, do more. And he's kind of conflicted about that because he's been in this town for however long now, and these people know him. They he cares about the people, and having to leave something you've been accustomed to and something that you love so much, having to leave that is not an easy thing. And that's kind of what they do with his character. But what's interesting is there's a line that he mentions that and the reason I picked up on it was because it comes back a little bit later in the movie. Is Tom mentions how he wants, like, if someone's in a life or death scenario, he wants to be able to be there to help them. And the reason that I thought that line was interesting was because, again, that comes back not too much later in the movie, where and this line of dialogue is in is in the second trailer, I think, where Sonic mentions that the situation with the government hunting him down and stuff like that, it's a life or death scenario. And that's ultimately what gets Tom to actually go through and actively help him, because that's like, this is the scenario he's wanted to be able to help people in. And he's being provided one of those scenarios, so he's going to go through with it. And that's the reason I thought that line was really good, because it was a good way of explaining why Tom would actually care at all, or would actually go through with helping him, or helping Sonic, because that's what he said earlier in the film. So I thought that was a nice way of having those two parts, having that moment tie back later in the movie. I thought that was a nice moment. Or like, from a writing standpoint, I thought that was a fairly effective way of handling that. but yeah, it's just yeah, I don't know. I just I liked that the tying it all back to that particular line of dialogue and stuff like that. Um, Another thing that happens earlier in the movie, and this is a very very small one of the little like Easter egg things they threw in there, and since we're still kind of going through various aspects of the earlier parts of the film, this is just something I had noticed, and I don't necessarily care for this, but I thought it was like, all right, fair enough. I guess you got to have it in there. There is actually, I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with the Sonic drawing, the poorly, crudely drawn picture of Sonic that has been on the internet for freaking ever. That actually makes a brief little cameo appearance in this movie. I think relatively early on because uh, I forget for what reason, but there's like this crazy. There's like this supposedly crazy old man that's like Sonic is basically like a myth to him, to where it's like a whole Bigfoot thing where he's like, I know it's out there. I know it's out there in the woods. I just need to find it. And and he pulls up a piece of paper that has like a sketch of what the creature is supposed to look like, and he's called the Blue Devil, which fair enough, but that's what he calls him. And on the piece of paper, it is literally just a drawing. It's the drawing of Sonic on the picture, and it's like, okay, if you're gonna use that like crudely drawn drawing of if you're gonna use that in any capacity in a movie, that wasn't a terrible way to work it in. I don't care too much about the whole Sonic thing because I think it's at this point it's way overplayed and it's not even necessarily funny. Most of the time, but you know what? It didn't necessarily make me laugh, but I was like, you know what? All right, if they, I guess at this point, they felt like we gotta put this in here. And you know what? In terms of tying it into the movie, it wasn't a terrible way of doing it. So I don't know. That was a small little thing that I did pick up on when I saw the movie because they showed the piece of paper and I saw that and I was like, oh gosh, they put that in this movie, didn't they? But so yeah, that's in here. So regardless of how you feel about that, or how I feel about it, that it's in the movie. So, but yeah, that's something that I picked up on. It like that's one of those little Easter egg things that's in this movie, and this movie does have a good amount of them. That depending on how like into the Sonic, if you're fairly into the knowledgeable about the Sonic series in general, you'll probably pick up on a good amount of these, if not all of them. But that was one of them I did actually see and pick up on. I was like, oh, okay, so that's what they did. But yeah, just to kind of I guess go into more like because I don't want to have to, I'm not going to go into every single specific of this movie because I don't, like I said, I don't remember all of the, small, minute details, and I kind of want to get into some more overarching stuff that isn't into specific parts of the film. Let's see, think I had it, oh yeah, the way the characters are handled in this movie, Sonic's character I'll start off with first is Sonic as he's portrayed in this film is different from, at least as far as how he is in the games, because he's been portrayed more or less the same in the games for pretty much the past decade. And I know that not everybody is the biggest fan of how he's been betrayed, and in the games for like the past decade, and not to get terribly far into that because that's a whole separate topic, but he's been betrayed a certain way in the games for a while now, And this is different from that. And not only is it different, but it makes sense why his, the way he acts and his personality is different, because of the fact that this is clearly a younger version of Sonic than we've seen in the games and stuff like that. Like, this is meant to be a young version, because obviously, between the opening sequence and the rest of the movie, Sonic has obviously gotten older, but he still is very much like a kid. He's very talkative. He just wants to run all over the place. Use his power and all kinds of stuff. Like, that's just kind of how he is in this film. And yeah, so it's just that's kind of how they portray him in this, and I thought it was fine. I thought it worked, and it makes sense for the way that they set up Sonic's character in this movie, because yeah, he probably would act like that. I mean, for crying out loud, he hasn't even had like any kind of parental figure for like the past 10 years when we see him throughout the rest of the movie, because he's been on his own. And that's another thing, actually, that's a part of his character. Not necessarily entirely through this movie, but it's something that does get brought up a decent amount, like in the first half of the movie, is the fact that because Sonic is on his own on Earth, a world that isn't entirely familiar to him, and it's not where he grew up, and he doesn't have any parental figure or anybody to look up to, or any friend to hang out with or anything. He does suffer from loneliness. Like, he's just a he's just a lonely guy. He's been on this world that he's not really entirely familiar with. He doesn't know anybody because he's never bothered to actually one-on-one interact with anyone else. And he's just kind of isolated himself, and he's freaking lonely. It's the whole sequence that we see in the trailer of him playing baseball by himself, and that's what kind of kicks off a lot of this movie, is the fact that he realizes, like, when he's playing a game of baseball by himself, he really realizes, like, he gets like a really good hit with the ball, and he hits the ball with the bat, and then he's kind of starting to celebrate, but then he looks around and he's like, no one here, there's no one here, no one saw what I just did, no one's here to no one's here to acknowledge what I just did, and I'm just here by myself doing something that doesn't have any purpose. So, and that's what makes him kind of snap, and he realizes, like, what am I doing? I'm just doing stuff by myself. I'm alone. I have no one here. I have no friends. I have no nothing. And that scene leads to him, getting angry and ultimately finding out, like, kind of what the full potential of his power can be, because as we see in the trailer, he kind of releases like this giant shockwave, and that kind of clues everybody off to the fact that, okay, there's something else going on here. What the heck caused this and all that? And then that's when Robotnik gets brought into the picture and all that stuff. And I guess that's a good segue of talking about Robotnik and slash Eggman's character in this, of course, played by Jim Carrey in this. Jim Carrey has been one of the big takeaways, people that have seen the movie at this point. I think if there's any takeaway that people were going to have from this movie, it probably was going to be Jim Carrey. I think that's pretty easy easy thing to predict. I will say, I don't, at least off the top of my head, I don't believe I've seen a whole lot of Jim Carrey movies, and even if I have, it's probably been a good amount of time. But I gotta say, yeah, I think Jim Carrey did a good job as Eggman in this film. I thought it worked the way they did it. I thought it worked. It was entertaining. Jim Carrey was entertaining to watch, and all that. But yeah, I thought his performance was pretty good. And yeah, I thought the way they handled him was interesting. This is, of course, a very different version of Robotnik slash Eggman than we've seen in the games. Much like Sonic, it's very different than what we've seen in the games. Uh, but it's they treat him more as like a a person that works for the government or the military. He's like a scientist, stuff like that. And they do make it a big point, in the movie to kind of remind you like this guy is supposed to be very very intelligent, and they do make that a point throughout the film. And yeah, I mean, I don't know. I thought Jim Carrey was pretty entertaining. He had some funny, had some humorous and funny lines. Um, but yeah, I think Jim Carrey did a pretty solid job for what the version of Robotnik and Eggman that they had in this movie. I thought he did a pretty good job, all things considered. And I'd imagine he probably did have a lot of fun. From what he has said, he had a lot of fun with it, and I think you can see that he probably he did have a lot of fun with the role. Um, yeah, and even the going on to the human characters. The two main ones they focus on are, of course, Tom and his wife, which I can't remember her freaking name for some reason, but I'd have to look it up or something again. But but yeah, the two of them, Tom is the main human character that's throughout most of the movie, because we see Tom's wife earlier in the movie, but then she really doesn't show up until later in the film, and then she's pretty much in the film from that point onward. Um, and I thought that they did pretty good. I thought their characters were pretty good, all things considered, and the relationship between Sonic and Tom I thought worked pretty well throughout the film. Um, the back and forth they had, just the way they worked off each other and stuff, I thought it was handled pretty well. And um, yeah, I don't know. I just the way that all the characters were handled, I thought was pretty good, and I liked it. You know, like I said, the Tom and Sonic relationship I thought was good. I thought it worked. Um, and yeah, I mean, it's just I liked a lot of stuff, and I thought it worked overall. Um, and I guess going kind of off of the characters thing, something else I wanted to talk about, and this is kind of going back to the whole formulaic thing again as well. But there is a part in this movie, not terribly close to the end, I feel, but it's during like the middle section with the whole, pretty much like the whole middle section of this movie is basically the whole road trip thing, which is what a lot of the marketing and stuff has kind of focused on, which, to be fair, that is like a good chunk of the movie. So, you know, that's, they only have so much stuff other than the road trip stuff to focus on. Um, and there is a scene, and it's also the scene. It's this overall scene that we've seen certain sequences of in the trailers with Sonic and Tom being in the truck, and Robotnik's going after him, and he's sending all these different machines or robots after him and stuff like that, and we've seen it in the trailers. And in that sequence leading up to the sequence, or that scene, I should say, um, Sonic and Tom end up getting into an argument about the whole fact that Tom wants to go to San Francisco. He wants to, go somewhere else with his job and his career, and that he's willing to leave the people that he has been he's been helping and serving in this town for so long, and Sonic doesn't, gets into an argument about him how he doesn't feel like that's the right thing to do. Like, you know, you are needed here. Sure, they could get someone else to do the stuff that you do, but they don't do that. They get you to do it. You're the one that they know. You care about these people. They care about you. You know, and Sonic doesn't feel like it's the right thing to just up and leave these people, after knowing them and after caring for them for so long. He doesn't feel it's the right thing to do, and they get into an argument. And what you would probably expect, and I kind of was hearing a few I kind of had, heard and listened to some reviews that were released before the film, when the film came out, and before I went out to watch the film myself. I think one of them had mentioned, like, oh, there's kind of like a fight between the two, Sonic and the main human character, and and when I heard that, I was like, oh, so they're gonna do the thing that like family movies kind of do sometimes, where two main characters get into a fight, and they're like, and then they have to like mope around for like the next 10-15 minutes of the movie, and then their paths are going to cross again, and then they're going to make up, and then they're going to be like, I'm sorry for this. They're going to do that whole thing and spend like 10-15 minutes of the movie doing that when they probably could be doing other things. That's immediately what my mind went to. And it's like, okay, so they're probably going to have that whole moment, and, it's going to be what it is. But no, they actually didn't, because usually when that stuff happens, the characters get into an argument, they get fed up with each other, the two characters, go their separate ways, and then it's like I said, 10-15 minutes later, they mope around, and it kind of brings the movie to a halt, and then they find their way back to each other, and then they are like, okay, let's put that aside and be friends and stuff again. In this movie, there is a fight, like I was saying before, the whole action sequence on the road. Before that sequence, Tom and Sonic do get into an argument, but that's pretty much where it ends. Like, there's no moment where Sonic and Tom are like so angry at each other that like Tom, leaves Sonic stranded on the side of the road and drives off, and they have to go their separate ways. Like, that doesn't happen. They do get into a fight, but it doesn't result in the movie like grinding to a halt for the next 10-15 minutes until these characters can work things out and get back together again. Which I think is kind of good, because again, that's just another thing that you would expect to possibly happen in a movie like this that either doesn't happen at all or doesn't play out entirely the way you would think it would. And again, I thought that was interesting, because like I said, I was like, when I heard that one of the reviews or whatever brought that up, I was like, okay, I think I know where they're probably going with that. But then, I saw the movie and like, oh, okay, that's actually not what I thought was gonna happen. I thought, they were gonna do the whole thing they usually do, but they didn't end up doing it. And I guess you could kind of say that fight, that argument that they get in, ultimately doesn't have much of a bearing in the rest of the movie. And I guess depending on how you look at it, you could be right about that. But I don't know. I mean, if it comes, I don't know. I thought I didn't have a problem with the way it was handled, and like I said, it isn't handled in the kind of cliche way that's the type of situation is usually handled in these kind of movies. So I thought it worked, and it was an interesting way of just kind of going about it in a different way. But yeah, they fight, and they don't really. It doesn't really have any major long-lasting effects, and that's probably because by the end of that scene, after they have the argument, Sonic ends up getting injured, and he's kind of down and out for a little bit of the movie after that. So I guess that's kind of their way of getting around it. But yeah, it's just, I don't know. Overall, like I've kind of been saying throughout the discussion so far, is just I don't know. There's some kind of, expected things that you would kind of there's things in here you would kind of expect of these type of movies, but again, they either don't do them at all like you would think they would, or they go about them in somewhat different ways than you would think. And I don't know. That was just something that I was just kind of picking up on as I was watching it. I thought it was actually pretty interesting. Um, let's see. Oh yeah, another thing that they do, I think, twice throughout this movie, and people have also kind of talked about this, is they do two times in the movie they do these sequences where every like time stops, because the whole idea is like, oh, Sonic's so fast that he's so fast compared to everything else around them that time basically stops, and he can basically just do whatever he wants, and then time can like go back to normal. And I feel like this really started in the X-Men movies with Quicksilver. It's basically the thing everybody compares it to, because I think a decent amount of movies tried to do the same kind of thing afterwards. And, you can kind of say, well, it's been done before and it's kind of overplayed at this point. But considering you're dealing with a character that speed is a major factor of the character like Sonic, I think it makes sense to do it. And to be fair, they don't like overblow it in this movie. They only do it like twice. And the second time they do it, it actually doesn't work entirely the way you would think it would. And that's actually something that I like, because like I said, there's a slow motion sequence where Tom and Sonic are in a bar during the road trip. They're in a bar, and of course, being a bar, they end up getting into a fight, and but Sonic does the whole, moving really fast to, basically slow down time. And of course, this is probably one of the moments that's really kind of like a real, like, something you would see in a family-friendly movie, which this is, really a family-friendly movie, but, I don't know. It's just kind of one of those moments where you would be like, all right, yeah, I get what they're going for with this. But yeah, Sonic, sets up all these, traps, and, just does all this stuff while time is slowed down, and then basically completely takes care of any of the threat that was in that bar, and then they get out. So that's the first time they use it, and all things considered, I think the scene it was pretty well done, and they had music. That's one of the few times they had music playing over a scene in the film. The second time they do it, though, and this was shown in the trailers as well, in the first trailer, where, time slows down, Robotnik's shooting all the missiles and stuff towards him, time stops, and then he just starts, just messing stuff up while time slowed down. What's interesting, though, and I like that they did this, is they actually have, because by this point in the movie, and we see this kind of in the trailers as well, is Robotnik gets his hands on one of Sonic's quills, or whatever you'd say, and he uses that quill, because there's a section of the movie where he's kind of testing it and seeing what, because there's like, I guess, because Sonic, like, I guess unlocked his power basically. There's, I guess, there's a certain amount of energy, I guess, stored in this one singular quill, and he uses it as a power source from that point onward, and he just uses it as a power source, and so in a way, he's basically using Sonic's, at least his energy, against him, and something they do that's interesting during the second slow motion sequence is when time slows down, everything is affected by it. Everything's moving slow, but Robotnik is still inside, like, his ship basically, and he actually, I guess it's meant to be implied that because Robotnik is in his ship, and the energy source that's coming from the quill is he's close to it or whatever. He's using that energy because what happens is Robotnik, of course, is affected by the time the slow mo as well, but he's still able to move just enough to where he's basically kind of in the same keeping the same speed as Sonic, and it allows him to press a button in his ship, and I think it fires more missiles and it catches Sonic off guard because Sonic was like, well, I'm faster than anything else, so everything else is going to move really slow compared to me. But what he wasn't expecting was Robotnik being able to actually kind of move just as fast as him and be able to press the button and then catch Sonic off guard. So the fact that like the second time they used this whole slow motion sequence, it actually doesn't play out the same way the first one did. I like that. I like that it also makes Robotnik a fairly it makes him more of a good villain because he actually he gets put into a situation and he manages to outsmart Sonic in that scenario. And I don't know, it was a really cool scene, and I liked it that it didn't play out the way that you might have thought, and it certainly didn't play out the way Sonic was wanting it to or expecting it to, because his whole thing up until this point in the movie is like, I'm faster than anything. And, he kind of gets cocky about that, about, going up against Robotnik. He's like, what are you going to do to me? I'm faster than anything you can do. And he ends up, not entirely being correct because Robotnik's able to outsmart him. And then that whole sequence leads into this part of the sequence we saw at the beginning of the movie, and it leads into the pretty much like the big action sequence that happens at the end of the movie with and we've seen clips of it in the trailer where Sonic's running across the Great Wall and stuff like that, and that's the finale of the movie is just Robotnik chasing Sonic, and he's throwing rings to transport him to different parts of the planet and stuff like that, and it's pretty cool. But yeah, and so that and the stuff that happens after that in general, the whole the finale and the whole Sonic versus Eggman thing, I liked it, especially with the way that Sonic ends up taking out Eggman at the end, where he just keeps because by the end of the movie Sonic taps into his power, and he just freaking goes all out, and he just keeps, attacking Eggman's ship, and he's just glasses constantly shattering. He's just messing the thing up, and the whole thing results in Sonic using one of the rings, because a few times throughout this movie, Sonic's plan in order to, once the government starts kind of getting starts kind of closing in on him, his plan is to use, because the whole reason why Longclaw gave Sonic the multiple rings is because whenever he was in danger and he needed to escape from danger, he could use one of these rings and go to different locations. That was the whole reason. So when the government starts closing in on him, his plan was, okay, I'm going to go to a different location with one of these rings. And a lot of the movie is focusing on him because he loses his rings as a result of, Sonic ends up losing his rings, and they have to, travel to, I think it is San Francisco, in order to get the rings back. And that's basically why this, a lot of this is a road trip type of thing and all of that. And, but he ends up using one of the rings to transport Robotnik to the place that Sonic was initially trying to get to himself. And they never name drop it, but we kind of see it in, I think it was in the first trailer as well. Uh, it's like a mushroom planet or a mushroom world, and they never give it a name, but it's fairly safe to assume that's probably meant to be like a version of Mushroom Hill from Sonic 3. And that is how, because we see it at the end of the first trailer, Robotnik does end up getting trapped there. And so people that predicted, like, oh, when we saw, Eggman look like he has the big bushy mustache and the goggles and he has no hair and stuff like that, people weren't entirely off when they said that was going to be like, oh, that's going to be like a post-credit scene. It's not actually going to be in the movie. I mean, they weren't entirely correct because it's not a post-credit scene, but it's towards the end of the movie and it's not a majority of the movie, so they were kind of correct. But we do see how he ends up there and stuff like that, and so yeah, ultimately, going back to the whole final sequence overall, though, I thought it was pretty well done. I thought it was pretty well done. I liked it. So, but yeah, and this kind of ties into the visual effects as well. I thought the visual effects were pretty good too. Like, nothing in this film necessarily felt out of place. Like, things blended together pretty well, and yeah, I don't know. I thought that because back when this movie, I don't even know if even the first trailer had been released by this point. But for a while, I basically had been thinking, like, if there's things that are going to be good about, that there's a few things that are probably going to be pretty good about this movie, is I was thinking Jim Carrey's performance would probably be pretty good, which it was. Ben Schwartz's Sonic voice, I was thinking he's probably going to do a pretty good job, which he did. I haven't really talked about that yet, but yeah, Ben Schwartz, I thought he did a pretty good job as Sonic. I thought his Sonic voice was pretty good. It was fitting especially for the version of Sonic that they had in this movie. I liked his performance. I thought he did a pretty solid job. But yeah, I thought his voice was going to be, his voice was probably going to be pretty good. And then the other two things that I thought were going to be good about this movie, like I said, I don't know if the first trailer had even come out by the time I was thinking about this. But then I thought the other two things that are probably going to be takeaways for people for this movie is there's probably going to be some pretty good action sequences, which I would say, yeah, they were pretty good. They weren't like, a lot of it was just kind of Sonic running away from certain things and stuff like that, but, whatever. But I think they were handled, the ones they had were handled well, so that ended up happening. And the other thing I was thinking was, like, there's going to be some probably going to be some pretty good visual effects and CG. And I would say that, yeah, they did a pretty good job with the visual effects, and, Sonic himself looks really good, and, I think that, that redesign, they did a really good job on it. And yeah, but ultimately all four of the things that I thought that were going to be like bare minimum things that people probably would have ended up liking about this movie, I would say actually came true. But yeah, overall though, gonna look at my notes again because I know I've kind of been all over the place. But let's see. I think I've actually kind of covered a good amount of my notes, surprisingly. I have a few last things, at least as far as the notes are concerned, that I would like to bring up. So this is pretty much like stuff that happens towards the very end, the very end of the movie. Like, we're getting into like the credits territory. But something else that's actually it is on my notes. I was about to say something that isn't on my notes I want to bring up real quick, but it actually is on my notes. So I mentioned how Eggman gets sent to another world through one of the rings, and he gets stuck there. So he's now stuck in the mushroom world now. And something that happens at the like I think they show the title again before the credits roll and stuff like that or whatever. And the ending to the actually like the main movie itself, Sonic actually stays on Earth, which I thought was kind of interesting. But because of the whole idea of they kind of bring up of not being able to leave, not being not wanting or not being able to leave what you've known for so long and what you love. Sonic has grown used to Earth, and he's grown used to living where he's been living for a long time, and he ultimately decides not to leave. So where we leave off with this movie is Sonic is still on Earth. He hasn't gone anywhere else or anything like that, which makes me wonder. We'll see if this film gets a sequel. Which so far, just to kind of go on to this briefly. At this point in time, the box office, because this is still before the official box office weekend amount and stuff like this for this film has come out. I'd imagine it seems like it's being, the way people are talking about it, seems like it's going to actually do pretty good, even better than I think a lot of people were thinking. This movie, it seems like, I'd imagine, especially considering the budget for this movie, at least the budget itself, I'm not sure entirely about marketing, but this movie will probably at least make its money back, if not more. But I think it will overall do well enough to get a sequel at this point. And so if Sonic does end up going to another world or something like that in a potential sequel, it's going to be interesting to see how they handle that, because the way they leave this movie off, it's just like, nope, he's staying on Earth. That's how it is. So I don't know. We'll see where they go with that, if a sequel does actually end up happening. Another thing, but going back to my initial thing I was talking about was, so Sonic stays on Earth, and that's kind of where we leave things off. But then there's a sequence with showing us what is going on with Eggman in the world that he has now been transported to, and it shows him basically taking a blade and kind of cutting off hair and stuff like that. He's already got the freaking crazy bushy mustache. He's still got his goggles, which he has by that point prior to that. And yeah, so something's gonna happen with him. If we get a sequel, he's possibly gonna somehow find his way out of that world and find his way back to Earth, or who knows? I don't know what's going to happen, but something's going to happen with that in a potential sequel. So they do leave him off, basically being the Robotnik or Eggman that is closer to the games. So that's interesting. So it's going to be interesting to see where they go with that in a potential sequel, like I said. So that's one of the last things in the movie. And then I believe it cuts to the credit sequence basically after that. The credit sequence I'll just bring up just because it's kind of like what movies have been doing, some of, bigger movies have done, where they kind of do a stylized little sequence for the initial credits before they go to the rest of the credits, which are just, traditional, text on a black background. But, the style, and I think this was also in the music video, that music video they released for the song "Speed Me Up," which I guess is like the vocal theme or whatever for this movie. I think the stuff that they showed in that music video is basically the stuff that is the credits sequence, and they just do like a they basically try to recreate the I think it's like the 16-bit, design and appearance of the Sonic, the Sega Genesis games. And yeah, the credit sequence, it was pretty cool. It was cool seeing stuff that you actually saw in the movie being turned into like 16-bit sprites from the Genesis and stuff. That it was pretty cool seeing the stuff that they did. There's a lot of references to Sonic stuff in there as well. So that's probably where a lot of referential stuff is in the credits. But because they reference, like, they show the Sonic 3 special stage is shown in there at one point. There's a bunch of stuff in it, but the credit sequence was pretty cool. It was nice to look at with all the stuff that they did. And then there is a mid-credit scene. It's not something that is after the credits. It happens after the initial, like, credit sequence, and then this happens. I don't believe there's anything after the credits. So there really isn't a post-credit scene. It's more of a mid-credit scene. And this is something that did, I think, get leaked out, and there was some information coming out before the movie came out that people were starting to basically piece it all together. And unfortunately, because, YouTube likes to recommend videos every once in a while, and you see stuff in YouTube thumbnails, and you're like, whoa, great, that's something that I now know. But regardless, it didn't change the fact that this is something nice that was thrown into the movie. The mid-credit scene for this movie, it just shows a ring, one of the transportation rings popping, showing up, and Tails flies out of the ring, and so yeah, Tails just transports to Earth, and he's got this little device. I guess it's like some sort of tracker or something. And he looks at it, and he says something along the lines of, he's here. I just hope I'm not too late. And then we see him kind of jump off this cliff, and then we see him fly up, and then he starts zooming down. I believe because we see a town, and I believe it's supposed to be Green Hills, and we see Tails, basically just speed on down there. And that's really the entire post-credit scene. Or not post-credit, but mid-credit scene. And so obviously that is setting... So Tails is in this movie. It's only during the mid-credit scene. And he's not referenced or acknowledged in any other part of this movie. Up until that point. But he is technically in the movie. And that is something that's very interesting. Because... Again, he's not in any of the other part of this movie, so really, as far as the movie itself goes, it is just Sonic as far as Sonic characters go. We have, we have Echidna, the Echidna tribes at the beginning, Echidna tribe at the beginning of the movie and stuff like that. But other than that, really nothing else. It's mainly just Sonic as far as characters from the Sonic universe go. But yeah, seeing Tails in the movie was nice, and it's clearly setting up a sequel, and it's very appropriate that they're setting up Tails to be a character in the second movie, considering Tails was a character that debuted in the second ever game. But yeah, so Tails is being set up as a character in the sequel as well, so there's a decent amount of sequel setup for this movie. Like I said, with Sonic still being on Earth and what could potentially happen with that, with Tails now showing up looking for Sonic for some reason, and with Eggman and Robotnik still being trapped on another world. There's definitely some setup, and there's kind of some questions of like, well, do Sonic and Tails already know each other? Because Tails clearly seems to know who Sonic is because he's looking for him. But do they already know each other and they just got separated when Sonic had to, go to Earth? Or is there is there some other reason why Tails is looking for Sonic? I don't know, but that's stuff that's going to be explored in a sequel if we end up getting that. but yeah, so that's probably one of the bigger surprises of the whole movie, and it's in the mid credit scene. Um, but yeah, overall though, I've talked a good while now. So I guess I'm gonna start, and I've gone over pretty much all of my notes. And I would be here for hours upon hours if I tried to talk about every single detail of this movie, and I don't really know. I don't think I really did an amazing job going over the necessary, the actual plot or anything. But I just wanted to do a general discussion of this movie because, I went and saw it, last night, and I figured, what, I'll talk about this. Never really did anything else to talk about this movie, so now that it's out, I might as well do something on it. And like I said, I liked the movie, and it seems like a lot of people are overall. And one other thing something I'll bring up as well, and this is like the last thing on my notes that I haven't talked about, is and this really clicked with me as we were leading up to the release of this movie. It is amazing how much of a 180 this movie has had in the perception of everybody's perception of this movie. As soon as it all started when that second trailer came out. I mean, technically speaking, you could probably say people's perception of this movie to some degree was starting to do a 180 the moment that they said, after the first trailer came out, the moment they said that they were going back and redesigning Sonic, and how then later they were saying that we were delaying the movie. I think people started to be like, all right, there might be something here. That's, this is an improvement. But as soon as that second trailer came out, I think this movie did an entire 180 as far as its reception, as far as people's, expectation. And yeah, and ultimately it seems like, for this movie to at least end up being a decent movie, yeah, the character design actually ended up being like the one missing piece from this movie. Because, I know some people were, some people had varying opinions on them actually going back and redesigning it. And one thing that I have heard some people that, I had heard that, some people had brought up the fact that, just because they're redesigning Sonic doesn't mean the rest of the movie is automatically going to be good. Something I heard it compared to was the fact that, yeah, you can, going back to the original, the Super Mario Brothers movie, okay, yeah, you can give the Mario Brothers higher quality costumes for the actors, but that doesn't make the rest of the movie any better than what it is. So, them going back and changing Sonic's design and redesigning him, that's no guarantee that the rest of the movie is automatically going to be amazing. But to me, considering the fact that, considering what we ended up getting, which, yeah, it's no masterpiece, but at the same time, it's not anything it's not anything terrible either. So the fact that, because of the redesign, we ended up getting a solid movie with a pretty good character design, I feel like, yeah, in this scenario, it actually ended up being the fact that, yeah, the movie was already fine as it was, but changing the character design ended up being one thing that, yeah, they probably did need to change it overall, because it would have, brought down the public perception of the general perception of this movie if they hadn't changed it. So, I don't know, I feel like it all kind of worked out in the long run. But yeah, just this needs to be put into the history books as far as movies go, because I don't think there's ever been a movie that has made this much of a 180 from when the first trailer came out to the release of the movie. The fact that this movie was being, everybody was cracking jokes at its expense. Everybody was making fun of it. Everybody was talking crap about it. Everybody was just tearing this movie apart because of the design, because of how that first trailer was put together, everything. And people already that were aware of the movie being worked on were already kind of skeptical because of the whole live action CG hybrid and, stuff like that. And the fact that not only did they go back, change, redesign Sonic and do all that, but then the way they put together a really good, fun, solid second trailer with a new design, and that is what won people over. And then the fact that all the stuff we were getting leading up to the movie, and then we got the movie, and the fact that people are like, hey, this is a pretty solid movie. It's just, I don't know, man. It's astonishing to me that this movie has managed to pull off such a 180. And this is another thing I want to say too, to kind of say before I end this, is as a Sonic fan myself, and granted, I would say that personally, I'm probably more of a Sonic fan now than I ever have been, just because of the fact that, like, within the past, I guess ever since 2016, leading up to the release of Sonic Forces and Mania. But prior to that, I think I've always been a Sonic fan to some degree. But, like, it was around 2016 because, Forces was announced, Mania was announced, and those were the new big games, and we hadn't had any new games in a while, and stuff like that, or at least, like Sonic Team developed games and stuff. I feel like within the past 5 or so years, I've really dug the furthest into the Sonic community, or like keeping up on this stuff, that I ever have before. Because like I said, I think I've always been a Sonic fan to some degree, but I feel like as far as being, a part of as much of this stuff as I am, or at least like keeping up to it, keeping up with all the information as much as I have, I feel like that, because of that, I feel like I'm more of a Sonic fan than I ever have been. And I gotta say, as someone who follows this stuff a lot, maybe more than he should, I gotta say that like I said, as a fan, being as tied into the, as aware and tied into this franchise as I am, I'm very happy that this movie, not only just this movie, but a Sonic movie, and one that people were completely, just tearing apart, ripping apart, making fun of, and it didn't seem like it had any hope in the world of pleasing people in any respect, whether it be fans or otherwise. And then seeing it, gradually, building up to its the redesign and all that stuff, and then dropping that second trailer and seeing this movie win people over and do a complete 180, and it's a crazy comeback story. Like, this movie, I'm serious, like, this movie should totally be remembered. If this movie is remembered for anything, it should be remembered as a comeback story, because this movie, it's like the definition of a comeback story. Like, everybody was against it. They did not like what they were being shown. They didn't really have any hope in it. And then like a few days after, things started to slowly turn around and things were building up. And then we got the second trailer, and then everybody was like, all right, this actually looks pretty freaking good. And now the movie's out, and for the most part, a lot of people seem to be at the very least enjoying it. And I don't know, man, as a Sonic fan, I'm glad that people can actually enjoy something with this franchise for once, because there's always been, like, Sonic has always had this constant, like, back and forth or divide when it comes to a lot of things in the fan base and stuff, and as far as, reception. But for this movie to come out and, basically seemingly going to end up being like a lot of other Sonic stuff that happens, where a lot of people just aren't very happy with it, or they just crack jokes at its expense or whatever. And to see it actually do a 180 and actually be really solid and have people actually really enjoy it and like it, I don't know, man. It just makes me happy to know that something in this franchise managed to accomplish that. And not only just accomplish it in general, but accomplish it in the form of a movie. You know? Like, who would have thought that, like, back in 2014, this movie would have turned out the way that it did? I mean, for crying out loud, who would have thought that back, early in 2019, when the first trailer dropped, that this movie would have turned out the way it did? Like, so much freaking happened leading up to this release of this movie, and I don't know, man. I'm happy that it seems like it's doing really well. It is, the reviews and the ratings seem like they're, for the most part, pretty good. It seems like this movie is making a good amount of money. We'll see what happens when the final box office comes out. I'll have to keep my eye on that. Like I said, we haven't really gotten the general idea of what the weekend opening for this is, but it seems like it's going to be even higher than what some people were predicting. But yeah, we'll see what happens with that. I'm looking forward to seeing how well this movie ultimately is done, and hopefully it can keep doing good, because I think, going into a sequel with this movie, if that happens, I think because they got the groundwork with this, groundwork of this movie in this first movie, now that they have the groundwork set, they have established this universe's origins for Sonic. They've established this universe's origins for Robotnik / Eggman. They've established the characters. They're building up stuff for a sequel with Tails and all that. I don't know, man. I hope this goes somewhere, and it seems like it's going to. And I'm just happy that, stuff is getting released that's associated with the Sonic franchise that people are actually liking. I'm happy for that, because I want to see this franchise do good and, be loved by a lot of people. And it seems like that's actually happening because of this movie. And this movie may be something this franchise ultimately needed. And it's crazy to think that, because, not terribly long ago, people would have thought you were freaking nuts for saying something like that. But I don't know. It seems like it's happened that way. So, but yeah, overall, yeah, I don't know. But yeah, I've gone on for like a good while longer than I thought I was going to. But you know what? This is actually probably about as long as I thought I was going to go on for. But yeah, like I said, I know I didn't go into every single detail, but I think I got a good amount of points across, and I just wanted to go over certain things and talk about this movie, because, why not? I saw the movie, and, there's only one time it's going to be all that relevant to talk about this movie, so what better time to talk about it other than when it's the most relevant, and, when it's in the limelight, so... But yeah, like I said, man, I'm glad that people are liking something tied to this franchise, and hopefully this keeps going forward, whether it be, with the Sonic comics, because I think people are already liking those. So hopefully, this franchise continues to do well for people, whether it be in the comics, whether it be more movies in the future, whether it be, hopefully, in the games, because... there's still a lot of mystery on that front, but, we'll see what happens with that, with all of that, because that's a whole other world, for this franchise when it comes to the games. So, yeah, in general, that's my discussion for the Sonic movie. Again, just wanted to talk about it to some degree or some capacity, because, I ended up seeing it, wanted to talk about it, so... But yeah, as far as, I guess, just to talk about certain things in the future, as I kind of mentioned, I was talking about the Sonic, the games in the world of Sonic video games. At the time of this recording as well, it has been confirmed that the Sonic South by Southwest panel is happening. this year, which I thought it was. I thought it. It's pretty safe to assume that it would end up happening. And that's probably the next time I'll do a video on something, just to kind of give some sort of, hint as to when I'm going to probably do something in the future. So yeah, if anything, the next time you'll probably see a video from me is probably towards the end of March, when the South by Southwest Sonic panel happens. Unless I come up with something else or have something else that pops up that I'll do a video or whatever revolving around. But yeah, so yeah, the future of the Sonic franchise as far as games and stuff goes, we're finally starting to get out of this dry spell for Sonic stuff. So hopefully what we end up getting and what they end up showing us is pretty interesting and looks pretty good. But that's still, a little under a month from now, so we still have some waiting to do. But yeah, we're finally starting to get out of this Sonic dry spell, and hopefully it will be a while till we get put into another one. But yeah, so yeah, when the South by Southwest panel happens, I'm not going to make a guarantee, but I think it's fairly likely I'll probably do some sort of video on that. But we'll see how things play out first. That's the most important thing. But I just felt like I'd bring it up here, just so you guys know that I am thinking about things. But yeah, other than that, like I said, man, I'm glad this movie seems like it's doing pretty good. I'm glad people are liking it. I liked it. I thought it was a solid movie. And yeah, I'm just glad people are liking it. And if you haven't seen the movie yet, hey, if you have even any interest in seeing it, go ahead, see it. You might end up liking it quite a bit. But and even if you don't end up liking it that much, hey, at least you went out and saw it and gave it a chance, because that's ultimately what I would want people to do with this movie, is at least give it a chance. You might like it. And if any of you have seen the movie, hopefully you liked it. You can let me know down below in the comments. I'd love to hear your thoughts on the film. We can talk about the film, whatever. Hopefully all you liked it. But yeah, at the end of the day, let me know what you thought about the movie, whatever. So, yeah, so I guess that's really all I need to say. Because if I don't end it now, I'll just continue to go on repeating the same things over and over, as I tend to do sometimes. So yeah, again, those of you who saw the movie, hope you enjoyed it, all that. And yeah, let's just enjoy all this good stuff while it's happening. And here's to more good stuff with the future of this franchise. So yeah. Anyway, with all that said, thank you all for watching or listening, and have a great night and take care. See you guys next time.